Among them was Texas Republican Senator Ted Cruz, who joins us now. Senator, welcome. Good to have you here in America's Newsroom. Thanks for being here.
Martha, it's great to be with you.
So you heard the assessment of Mr. Hume. He said, we heard really nothing, spectacular, and nobody really stood out. So that's the work that's cut out for you, to stand out and break away from this pack. How are you going to do that?
Well, I'll tell you, at the end of the day, the voices I'm listening to are not really coming from Washington. The voices I'm listening to are coming from the state of Iowa, the state of New Hampshire, the state of South Carolina. And I'll tell you, in the 4 weeks since we launched this campaign, the energy and the excitement and the enthusiasm we've seen has been off the charts. Heidi and I, we took our girls, we went barnstorming through all 3 early primary states. Every event we saw was packed. It was standing room only. A lot of the local press reported the crowds showing up were double the size of any other candidate.
What do you think it is about you that's going to make you different from Rand Paul, who we're going to speak to in a little while, and some of the other candidates that are sort of collecting? Jeb Bush, Scott Walker, Marco Rubio. What makes you different?
Well, I think there are sharp differences between our records, and I think what Republican primary voters are looking for is a leader who will stand for conservative principles and fight. If you think of the great issues and challenges of the day, think back at the last couple of years, the dozen biggest fights we've had. Whether it's standing up to stop Obamacare, standing up to stop the debt that's bankrupting our kids and grandkids, or standing up to stop President Obama's unconstitutional executive amnesty, or standing up to defend the First Amendment, free speech and religious liberty, to defend the Second Amendment, or to defend the Fourth and Fifth Amendments and privacy, or to defend the 10th Amendment and stop Common Core, or standing up for life and marriage, or standing up to strengthen our friendship with Israel and to stop Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. On every one of those issues, I think the questions primary voters are going to ask is who has actually walked the walk. And what I've tried to do in my time in the Senate on every one of those issues is stand and walk the walk.
So you say that you're not too concerned about the middle ground, about getting the independent voter and convincing people that you're not too conservative, which is the label that a lot of people put on you. You're more concerned about turning out the base. Tell us about that strategy.
Well, listen, I believe in common sense conservative values. I believe in, for example, live within your means. Don't bankrupt our kids and grandkids. Follow the Constitution. It is only in Washington that those are viewed as radical or extreme views. In the rest of America, those bring people together. Those are values that bring together Republicans, Democrats, independents, libertarians. One of the things I'm most encouraged about is we are seeing the old Reagan coalition come together supporting our campaign. We're seeing conservatives and evangelicals and libertarians and young people and women. So you think if all
of those people in the conservative bases, it's called, turn out for you, that you don't really need the independent voter?
I think you absolutely want the independent voter, and I think the way you win the independent voter is by standing clearly for common sense values. If you compare 2004, the last race Republicans won, to 2008 and 12, by far the biggest difference is the millions of conservatives who showed up in 04, who stayed home in 2008, stayed home even more in 12.
Your numbers aren't right on that.
Well, the data speak for themselves. Millions of evangelical Christians and millions of Reagan Democrats showed up in 04 and have stayed home for the last 2 cycles. And the key, if we want to win, is bringing those conservative back. And interestingly enough, when you stand for principle, when you draw a line in the sand, it does 2 things. It brings out millions of conservatives, but it also earns you crossover votes. Reagan Democrats, the only Republican in 50 years with a group of Democrats named after him, didn't get it by running to the mushy middle. He got it by standing for the values that make America strong.
So if you prevail, Hillary Clinton could very likely be the person that you go up against. She is being criticized for using her influence as Secretary of State to basically bring in money to her family's coffers and to the Clinton Foundation as well. How big a deal is this? Do you think this is something that could potentially push her out of the race?
Look, I think it is a real problem with someone who's holding themselves out as they want to be president of the United States, for them to have accepted millions of dollars from foreign nations over and over and over again, both to the foundation and in speaking fees for her husband, especially while she was Secretary of State. And it's one manifestation of a broader problem, which is the culture of corruption in Washington. I think the 2016 general election, the way we win is to run a populist campaign on behalf of hardworking men and women across America who want to believe again in the promise of America, and to run it against the bipartisan corruption of Washington, career politicians in both parties that keep growing government and
bring
debt.
out that idea of corruption and bring that into more focus, perhaps. You and John McCain have had words over the time that you've been working as a senator. The most recent back and forth is that in New Hampshire you said that you were pressing him to allow the military to carry concealed weapons on bases, and you felt that would prevent things like what we saw happen at Fort Hood. Here's what John McCain says about it. He says you're not pressing him on it. He says it came as a complete surprise to me that he had been pressing me. Maybe it was some medium that I'm not familiar with. Maybe it was through hand telegraph, maybe sign language. He's making a joke out of the whole thing. What say you?
Oh, I like John McCain. He's always voluble. He can always be counted on for a good quote. Listen, the question of concealed carry on military bases is an issue I've raised repeatedly. I've raised it at open hearings of the Senate Armed Services Committee, hearings where John McCain was, I believe, present at those hearings. And I also urged the prior chairman, Carl Levin, in writing, to hold hearings on allowing our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines to carry weapons on military bases. Now, I will acknowledge I may have misspoken in New Hampshire when I said that I've been pressing John McCain, and that what I have been pressing is the Armed Services Committee, and John McCain is the new chairman of it. And so I had sent a letter to the previous chairman, but I had not communicated that to John directly, although I had at a hearing, and will continue to raise it with John McCain, because the committee ought to listen to the military's arguments. The military brass opposes this. We ought to hear their arguments, but I'm a big believer in defending the Second Amendment rights of everyone, including our soldiers.
Senator, thank you very much. Good to have you here today. Hope to see you back soon.